Where's the audio on there for the video? Same with both cameras.
I never knew that.
Well, there you go.
Like, do some reading as well, so
Singing soprano.
Right. I suppose we've got to make a start.
yeah.
Right. Port. Everyone wanted to know how we managed to fake it for some reason. It's very, very simple, really. The end. So. So, get off! Sorry about the coughing. Remember, if I cough, someone's going to shout arse. What is port? That's what it is, really. It's a Portuguese fortified wine. You know all this stuff anyway. So we can't, technically we're not supposed to call it port really, are we? It's just fortified red wine. So not a lot to say about that. That's basically how it's traditionally made. So it's just a red grape fermentation. As far as I can see, or as much as I've read, you normally go to burn about half the sugar up and then throw some 80 to 90% grape spirit on top of it, which brings the alcohol up and kills the fermentation. So that's where the sweetness comes from. Most ports then barrel aged. There's all sorts of styles and designations and all that sort of stuff, which I'm not going to go into because it's not really relevant to us.
Why?
Sorry?
Why?
Because I said so.
Because we don't know.
I didn't memorise it.
Horse!
Thank you. That's the problem, fundamental problem most of us have got, is we haven't got access to high alcohol spirit.
Well,
Because
T500.
sorry?
Sales pitch. T500.
Yeah, but seeing as this is going on YouTube, we also got to point out that
Distillation is in fact
distillation is illegal. So none of us would do that because it's illegal. So we've got to find a different way, to fake it. Where did M1? Yeah, there we go. So we do things slightly differently. The base, you can start with anything that you'd normally make a red wine from. So fruit, grape or kits are good starting points. We're going to ferment it out completely to get the alcohol up, and then sugar feed it until the yeast croaks, basically. So with the right yeast you'd be up around 18%ish, and then we just go the normal degas, stabilise it, clear it, sweeten it up with sugar. Brandy is a good way of bringing the alcohol up and giving it that flavour. Yes?
Would it benefit sweetening with grape concentrate, red grape concentrate, rather than sugar?
You could.
Available from all good homebrewers.
Yes. Yeah. How much are you selling cans of red grape concentrate for?
$3.25 a tin there.
There you go.
So, good to you guys.
Brilliant. You taking into account my commission? Okay. So
25%, please.
you could, but the problem is it's quite bulky, so you're going to be sort of diluting the wine. I know when we did the black cherry thing.
He's going to say to me, if you guys are not going to take me seriously, I'm not doing this anymore.
No, when we did the black cherry thing a couple of years ago, I think I'd used sugar to back sweeten mine, and Rich had used grape concentrate. There wasn't a huge amount of difference really, so yeah, I suppose you could. But the brandy brings the alcohol up a little bit, and it gives it that sort of porty type flavour, because most ports are aged in barrels anyway, and brandy is basically barrel aged neutral alcohol. Bit of oak just to give it a bit more oak, and then as much age as you can, and that's it. It's a really simple process. That's important to say as well, because I think the only reason I'm doing this is I've probably done slightly more port. You know, I'm probably a page further on in the book than everyone else, and that's about it. Excuse me. So, base ingredients, those are just some examples really. Fruit, I've tried elderberry, black blackberry, cherry, either fresh stuff or places like Lidl's do sour cherry nectar, which is sort of high fruit content fruit juice. I think it's about 30%, whereas most, or even up to 50%, I think, whereas most supermarket fruit juices are a lot lower than that. Anything you use for red wine, really. And Grapefest is always a good time to do this because you can use a fruit base and then bulk it up with your grape skins from your fermentations as well. Same with grapes. I've tried a few different grape varieties and nothing seems to have come out bad yet. Same with the kit. You could either start with just use a kit, or a kit with some bulk in it, like grape skins or some fruit on top of that. So anything you use for a decent bodied red wine, really. I've tried a few different styles, which is really dictated what I've had on hand. There's an elderberry there which has got a hell of a lot of elderberry in it. There's a lot of fruit in it, so it's come out pretty full-bodied. But depending on your starting point, you might want to produce something which is a bit lighter, a bit less alcohol. Just a lighter drink basically. The fruitiness, like the black cherry port, is based on a Munton's black cherry kit, which Carl happens to have loads of with him at the moment. But that comes out, there's a lot of fruit in that as well, very, very cherryish. So again, that probably, we'll talk about alcohol and sweetness and oak, it's just balance really, what you normally do. You probably wouldn't want to put tons of oak into a black cherry kit, because it would just kill it.
Why? Why?
Richard would.
Why? Oh yes, you will.
Yeast, I put EC 1118. I tend to use K1V for all of it, because I think it's better flavour-wise than EC 1118, which tends to strip out, tends to be quite harsh, doesn't it? So it'll produce the alcohol, but I think K1V is just a bit gentler. So I'd always use that. If you wanted to end up at a lower alcohol level, there's no reason why you couldn't use something like RC212 or anything you normally use for reds, but bear in mind you're probably not going to get over about 15%. I'm not sure. What are the Gervings? Are there any Gervings that are good for red that will get over?
23%.
Right, so that's
the high alcohol.
yeah, okay. I've put there the wrong yeast. If you're using your Grapefest skins, you might, depending on what you're using, it might be RC2N2 or BDX or something like that. That may not be the one you want to use for your port. So I've just tried it as an experiment for a couple of years and it works. Is get your base wine fermenting really well on K1V before you add the grape skins from your Grapefest fermentation to it. And although initially there'll be a big population of yeast in the skins, the K1V will eventually take over and finish the fermentation off. So that mechanism does work really. Get your base wine going a couple of days before you press your Grapefest stuff, and then throw the skins in on top. It'll go berserk on the skin, the yeast in the skins for a while. Then they'll burn out. They'll reach their alcohol tolerance, but there's enough K1V in there to keep it going. So that's that has worked for me. Just a bit about the oak really. Like we said, it's all balanced. How much oak are you going to add? Remember the brandy that the entire tree in this case, but you might add a small tree rather than a large tree, depending on the style you want. But remember as well that the brandy is going to add a bit of oak to it as well. So take that into account. When you add the oak, I tend to do it after you've sweetened it and added the brandy, so you've got the basic port ready, and then you can add your oak and leave it on the oak taste regularly until you're happy with it. Now the boring bit, the detail. It's not much of it, don't worry. So not much detail really. Start off as you would with any red wine really. Everything proceeds normally down to the point where you know, that sort of SG is where you normally rack it off to a demi-john or get it under an airlock. It's a good example there, isn't it, Bob? Headspace.
It's just a little.
Trebbiano to there. Do you think that needs topping up?
No.
Okay. Okay. So the only thing we start doing differently then is, you know, we rack it off to a demi-john or something like that. I always take some of the lees as well, because some of the yeast is living down there, and you want the fermentation to keep going nice and strongly. In theory, there should be enough flying around in the must, but yeah, I just always take a bit. I don't know why. Draw a bit of the fermenting must off. Add some sugar to it, back into the demi-john, mix it up. Saying 1.030-ish. It doesn't really matter exactly what you go to, as long as you make a note of it. The thing I've learnt as well is not to go up a big step. I'm not sure why, but the yeast doesn't like it. It tends to, well, one, I virtually killed the fermentation doing that. Presumably it's a sort of osmotic shock thing that you're suddenly going from not much sugar to lots of sugar. So by only going up that amount as well, if you did inadvertently kill the fermentation, or you're adding right, you know, when the yeast was reaching its limit, the port isn't going to be too sweet at that point anyway, because you're going to end up with an SG around that. So it's not like you put in tons of sugar, kill the fermentation, and then you end up with something that's far too sweet. So all we do then is just keep doing it until the yeast croaks. So all I do is draw some off into a Pyrex jug, sugar into it, mix it, dissolve it back in, measure the SG, keep doing that, you get a fair idea of how much sugar you need to add each time.
If you didn't want to actually take some out and stuff, would it be easy just to invert a bit of sugar so you've got liquid sugar syrup?
You could do, yeah.
Put
Yeah.
that straight in?
Yeah, I'm always concerned about not sort of diluting or increasing the bulk of the wine up any more than I have to, which is the same idea as the red grape concentrate.
Right, yeah,
Is,
okay.
but yeah, I mean this is just my way of doing it. So yeah, you'd be nothing wrong with that, and it'd probably be easier to dissolve it as well. What I found as well is I've never had any problems with oxidation or anything like that, because the thing's still actively fermenting. So although you're pouring fermenting must out, mixing sugar, adding it back, pouring it out, adding it back, excuse me, never had any problems with oxidation or anything. It just seems to take it. And that's it really. Just keep going until the fermentation stops. Bear in mind, when you reach the alcoholic limit of the yeast, it doesn't tend to stop dramatically. It'll fizzle over a period of days or weeks. So you only know it's stopped by measuring SG, you know, a week or two intervals to make sure it actually has died. The bit at the bottom is important as well. I found that if you let the fermentation die, in other words, burn up all the sugar, it can be a bit difficult to get it going again. So, like I said, little and often, keep an eye on the SG and keep sugar feeding it. Which is what I said really. The obvious stuff. You're just looking for a drop in SG and leave plenty of time between the checks, because it will fizzle out slowly. The degassing and stabilisation steps, I just do exactly the same as I would with any other wine. I tend to add sorbate because I'm paranoid that although the yeast has died, I don't believe it, so I tend to just sorbate it as well. But that's up to you really. Clarification, exactly the same as you would with any other red wine really.
Worth mentioning for anybody who's watching it that sorbate and sulphate at the same time.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you can edit that bit. Yeah, the sorbate obviously add sulphite at the same time. Otherwise, you get all sorts of horrible tastes on board. So remember, yeah, the port's very sweet. It's a lot sweeter than most people are used to in terms of when you're trying to get the SG right. So it tends to be the alcohol which masks the sweetness really, but on a hydrometer that's the sort of range you tend to be looking at. Excuse me. What I do after learning from experience is the easiest way to do it is actually in a bucket rather than trying to stir things in with a demijohn. Again, I've never had any. So you're doing that deliberately?
Yes.
I've never had any problems with oxidation or anything like that, chucking everything in the bucket. But the one thing I do is set aside some of the wine. So basically, if I set some aside before you sweeten it or add brandy to it, if you overdo it, you can add some of that set aside wine back to reverse it out a little bit. Obviously, if you put too much in, you're stuffed. So sugar to 1.025-ish. You don't find many ports that are lower SG than that. So that's a good place to start at. A little bit, and then it just comes from taste and experience really. A little bit more until it tastes about right, and then the brandy tends to take out the effect of some of the sugar and give it that a little bit more of that alcoholic kick. Exactly how much you add, it will depend on what you like and what style of port you're making. So I mean, I put 150 to 375 there. I think the black cherry port's got about 150 and the elderberry's about 375 in it. So it really is a case of a bit of sugar, that tastes about right, a bit of brandy into it, yeah, a bit more brandy, and then if necessary a little bit more sugar until it just feels right. Like I said, if you feel like you've gone past the optimum point, you can use some of that set aside wine back into it again, just to bring it back again and then sneak up on the ideal point again. But yeah, there's no real formula to it, it's just to your taste. And that's exactly what I've just said in the wrong order basically. Oak, again we've already said it, so yeah, that's entirely down to you. It's okay, just chuck it in as normal and remove it when it tastes oaky enough. Nothing complicated. Yeah, it does benefit from age, I think, but exactly what you make is going to have a bearing on how long you need to age it. In my experience, forget about elderberry for about 4 years because it's just no good. It's worth it. Well, I've got some here, you can try in a bit, see what you think. And in my experience, yeah, if you go with a kit with some great fresh skins on top, leave it at least a year. Things like the chocolate raspberry port kit, which most people must have heard about, and probably most have tasted. I think it's catching, isn't it? Yeah, I think 6 months is, it gets drinkable then, and just improves with age after that.
The elderberry,
Yeah.
the 4 years plus, is that just purely because of the tannin, or it just physically takes that long to get out?
I don't know. I think elderberry's got a very distinctive taste, doesn't it?
It has, yeah.
I think I just found it took at least that long for that taste to sort of mellow out a bit and to go more wine-like rather than very, very distinctively elderberry.
And would that also change, say, if you steam extracted?
I suppose in theory it would cut it down a bit. because it does.
Steam extracting reduces some of the tannin,
Yeah.
pressure on the juice taste.
I got to admit, I haven't tried a steam-juiced elderberry port yet, but I will be. So I'll report back in a year.
Because I'm only just thinking, obviously,
Yeah.
we were talking about it earlier on, saying, you know, the steamer is fantastic, and obviously more than just the wine situation, but with if you're going to do the port too.
Yeah. Well, I tried my first steam-juiced elderberry and blackberry wine, and that was good after about a year. So presumably it'd be the same effect on the port as well. And that's it really. I mean, like I said, all of this is just my opinion, and stuff I've read. So I don't think there is a correct way of doing it. It's just that way works for me. It's probably a good place to start. And a lot of it, like I said, is just by feel. And give it a go. That's it. That's all I've got to say. So, like I said, nice and short and sweet. I've got up here, which would be interesting for people to try. That's a Ciligiolo port, which is a 2009. So that was actually made from Grapefest grapes. So it's not just using the skins. That is taking a gallon of Ciligiolo and sugar feeding it and doing all that sort of stuff. What else we got? The famous chocolate raspberry port, which tends to go down quite well, doesn't it? That's the elderberry. That's 2008, so that is 4 years old now. So hopefully, well, if you don't like it, it's obviously not quite 4 years old. So it's not my fault. And that's the black cherry port, which is the Muntons kit with, I think that was Merlot skins that went in on top of it. So that was 2010, so that should be drinkable. I don't think I've actually tried one of those yet from 2010, so you're all guinea pigs.
So for the black cherry, do you just make the kit up to, as per instructions, the 6 bottles?
Yeah,
let it ferment out, obviously.
Yeah.
As per with the skins.
Yeah, I think that one was using the skins already had K1V.
Right.
The Merlot that the skins came from was actually on K1V.
Right.
So all I did with that 10 litre bucket, make the concentrate up to the gallon mark. Don't worry about yeast, and I just filled the bucket basically. Left about that far from the top.
Right.
So I think it was about 2 or 3 gallons worth of skins. Obviously not 2 or 3 gallons in volume, it was 2 or 3 boxes worth of skins on it. Remember that most of the yeast colony is in the skins anyway, so as soon as it went in, it fired up. You're suddenly giving all the yeast all this food, and it just went berserk. Just keep pressing the cap down, like you would with any other wine. Waited till 1.010-ish, racked it into a demi-jar and kept sugar feeding it. And
You press the skins?
yeah, I did. Yeah, for some reason you don't get a lot out of it because I think they've already been pressed once, and yeah, I think it's just, as soon as you put any pressure on the press, it just goes straight down, and that's it.
Do you think there's any mileage in maybe taking some skins out and not pressing them?
Could do, yeah. It's going to add a bit more complexity and a bit more.
Do you mean the first run?
Oh, the first one.
So I'm taking all the goodness out of the first run of grape skins in there.
Yeah, that
Should work.
so. Yeah, it's worth a punt. I suppose that's always an equation, isn't it? You're not pressing them all at all, so you're losing some of your first run wine to do it. But yeah, no reason why not. Like I said, there isn't a right way or anything like that. It's just whatever works. It's just the technique, really, the method.
Have you tried using raisins or anything to sweeten stuff up?
No, I mean the elderberry. I think that the only other thing apart from elderberry that was in it was bananas to bulk it up a bit, the old-fashioned way, which was difficult for me because I do not like bananas. Me and bananas have an arrangement, so I don't eat them. They don't make me projectile vomit, things like that. So actually, mashing them up and putting them in wine was a bit. But but it's there purely for body. You can't taste it. So, yeah. Any questions? Like,
Can we
Is
taste
it?
it now?
yeah, I was going to say, is it? Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Excellent.
I'm going to have some.
I'm going to try the elderberry.